welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast, broadcasting as always during this stupid quarantine from all points in the New Orleans metro area. I'd much rather people be in my Star Wars room drinking my beer rather than spread out, but we do what we have to. But joining me as always, we have myself, Aaron, and Dave and Fredo. Everybody say hello.
Hi.
Hello.
And I did get a new mask. You guys saw the picture. I got my Boba Fett mask on the same day as another guy from the 501st he's got the Boba Fett costume. He got the same Boba Fett mask, and he posted on Facebook. And it's like, hey, I got mine today too. He goes, you didn't get Boba Fett, did you? I was like, this is the way. So
it's kind of like the episode in South Park when everybody shows up with the Chewbacca mask.
Yeah,
everybody goes to Chewbacca. Everybody's gonna go with Boba Fett this year.
My favorite South Park still is when they were playing Lord of the Rings and one kid's wearing a stormtrooper costume, and he says something. He goes, Kevin. So that's my favorite thing.
That's kind of a good point, though. I feel bad for long-time Boba Fett fans because now they got to deal with all this new fangled Mandalorian love from all these Johnny-come-latelys.
Well, here's the bigger problem. Here's the nerdier problem. Like I said, at Mardi Gras, when we were marching in Tux Parade, there was one dude who was in his Mando costume. He's part of the Mando Mercs. He was not the Mandalorian. You didn't see me do the air quotes. He wasn't Din Djarin. He wasn't Boba Fett. He was just a Mandalorian. But for 7 miles, we got screamed at, of, hey, it's the Mandalorian. Where's Baby Yoda? And blah, blah. It's like, it's the same people who go up to the TIE fighter pilots and go, that's the worst Darth Vader costume I've ever seen.
And it remains so wrong.
It's yeah. Anyway, so
well, he's paying for the price of success, so to speak, because at least now people are not going, hey, it's Boba Fett, not going, hey, it's the Mandalorian.
Well, and the guy in Tux that was with us, he was our biker scout. We're like, why didn't you bring a little computer messenger bag and just punch it every now and again? He hadn't seen the Mandalorians. He was like, what are you talking about? It's like, that would have been perfect, just stuff it with something and then hit it every now and again. It's a biker.
That would have been awesome. Well, on one hand, it would have been awesome. On the other, people might have jumped him. So 50-50.
Well, now he can get the Hasbro Bop It and have fun with it the whole way.
Oh, we don't want to go down that road again.
Actual family fun.
But no, it's being in the 501st. It's kind of like, you show up in your stormtrooper armor and you feel so proud of yourself. Then some dude shows up in Vader costume and you're like, you're nothing. You're back along the wall in the gym. The girls don't want to talk to you then. And
you're the Pips, and that's Gladys Knight.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, hey, everybody have a good week this week.
Pretty good. I mean, I've been doing nothing but Zoom meetings all week long, so had to record a Zoom conference. So
you need to tell your people that there's this thing called Google Meet, and it's everybody's all about Zoom. Everybody's drinking the Zoom Kool-Aid.
My point is, at some point, I'm just tired of all online meetings. So, doing 4 back to back kind of burned me out. So
I love the people who run meetings where it's like, okay, we have to have this meeting, but if we're done in 15 minutes, we're done in 15 minutes. We don't have to go the whole time, but and it's like you said, though, it's like this could have been handled in an email. And if you could get people to read their email, then yes, I would agree. But people do not read their email unless it's in a faculty meeting. That's when people read their email. But anyway, I digress. So I'm sorry for all your Zoom meetings. Dave, how are things going for you?
Similar place, just a lot of phone calls and online meetings and all that fun stuff. So, but I agree with you, if you don't got to go the whole hour, don't go the whole hour, please, for the love of God.
Yeah, it's don't have meetings for meeting's sake. But however, being somebody who, I've worked now remotely since 2015, and you actually cherish a video call because you get to talk to you're chatting. It's one thing, I can be chatting back and forth with people, but to see somebody face to face and to actually talk to another living human being, even though you're on a video, it makes all the difference in the world. So, so I see it from a little bit different perspective. That was really interesting because my previous job had a meeting like every single day, and now I have like one meeting a week.
Nice.
And most of that meeting I can just, it doesn't involve me. So, but hey,
you talking about appreciating that face-to-face interaction, and it makes me wonder, like, if you guys remember in Back to the Future 2 when he went to the Cafe 80s and he was interacting with all the different monitors and the celebrities that were on the monitors and just carrying on a conversation with them. I just like, that seemed like a little bit on the nose in retrospect. If you think back to it,
we
really
should totally, the three of us should totally open up a bar/cafe and have Max Headroom as the maitre d'. We should anybody listening to this now, you can't have that idea. That's our idea now. We're going to do that. But that would be...
the funny thing is that was a movie we saw as to the future, but it's now our past. 5 years removed.
Right?
That's deep, Fredo. Hey, by the way, sorry, this goes back to the stuff that Aaron should have been watching. I did my Marvel homework, and I've actually started going back and rewatching some stuff because as they come on TV, I'm like, did I watch this? Because I think that was the thing, watching a movie like every other day, they all just blurred together. But anyway, did you see that the final battle in Endgame got the 8-bit or the 16-bit treatment? Did you see that? I just saw that. I just saw it this morning, and it was totally awesome. So it was like super Star Wars, but with Marvel.
That's one of the things that looking back, that always struck me about that final battle. That it's very much, particularly that moment when the two sides come together. It's like if you had one of those extra long comic book panels just come to life, where you just flip the page and it takes up both pages. Every inch of the page is covered in characters battling one another, and you're just trying to soak up every inch of it because you're trying to memorize it all as a kid. And that's the same effect that last battle in Endgame did. It's very much oh my God, it's just an overload.
There are several instances of that within the Marvel movies that in going back and watching some YouTube videos of people talking about the Marvel movies and things like that. It's like they took those I think they called splash pages, from the comics and tried to recreate them on the screen. And if you hadn't read the comics like me, it was lost on you. It was still a cool shot, but it was lost on you. For somebody like Scott Colesby, who grew up, reading all these and saw that, it was like, that's so cool, so it is, but yeah, it's really interesting to go back and, like I said, watch these videos and people showing me this stuff that if I was a big Marvel nerd that I should have been nerding out over. Yeah, it's been kind of cool. So
if people haven't heard our Marvel episode from a few weeks ago, you should go back and check it out because that conversation with Colesby was great. He really sort of highlighted why Endgame for him as a comic reader was just the ultimate team up movie.
Yep.
So anyway, my wife was laughing at me because she will come out of her library and I'm watching a Marvel movie that's on TV. She goes, I think it's funny that this is now one of your go-to, when nothing else is on, you'll watch a Marvel movie. Like, blame Dave and Fredo. I think we're actually what we're going to start doing, because we realize we need another series to deal with. We're going to start watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on Netflix. So only 7 seasons there with 20 episodes each. So
actually, if I would recommend before you start Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., start with Agent Carter. I think Britt would like it as much as you. Because
Britt's a big Agent Coulson fan. So
I mean, if you like Peggy Carter from the first Avenger, it's her following her in the 1940s and 50s as they begin, create Shield, so to speak. But
Okay,
it's only 2 seasons, but it's really interesting because they bring in Howard Stark, they bring in what's her name, Haley Atwell plays Peggy Carter. It's really well done.
all right. Well, maybe we'll start with that then. So
Yeah, it's a
I'll
quicker
give-
it's a quicker series. You'll bump, you'd run right through it, and then you can jump into Agents of Shield.
I will give a review. So in New Orleans Saints news, I do want to give a shout out, and we'll maybe have to tag him on when we post this episode, Dave. But I think this is just awesome, as we're all New Orleans Saints fans. Cam Jordan has donated $25,000 to buy computers for kids, as they are probably going to be working, doing school remotely. $25,000, even if you just buy Chromebooks, that's going to go a long ways. And here's a guy he's one of those that has made New Orleans his home, and he is just a jewel here. And to do that for kids is just awesome. So shout out and a hoodat to Cam Jordan, whom the only time I've met was in the movie theater lobby waiting to see Solo.
Mm-hmm.
He was watching some other movie with his wife and kids, but Colesby and Fredo and I and Britt were waiting to see Solo. So I was the only one gutsy enough to talk to Cam Jordan. So maybe we'll have to tag him on this and let him know that we gave him a shout out and see if we can get a hoodat from him. So that's my Saints news, I think, for today. Anybody else have anything they want to add before we move on to trivia? Shaking your head is great podcast material to both of you. It's like me doing air quotes.
We figure, okay, it's a lot of things to say. Get on with it.
That's right. Can we put that in the podcast now? A little clip from Monty Python.
Yes, get on with it.
All right. Let's see here. Dave, we'll start with you. What manages to fire 3 laser bolts in Chewbacca's direction on the surface of Hoth?
That would be... Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say it again. What manages to fire 3 laser bolts in the Chewbacca's direction on the surface of Hoth?
I believe that to be the Imperial probe droid.
Yes, and much like our episode with Brittany, when I said, when I turned and I saw Lando, it's like, then the question was who rode something. At this time, I turned it over, and the first thing I saw was C-3PO. And so I was saying, C-3PO shot at Chewbacca? What?
That'd made for a funny scene.
Remember all the hubbub with him with the bowcaster? We thought he was going to go evil or rogue or whatever and Rise of the Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
I have that figure right here because it is pretty awesome to see C-3PO with a bowcaster. So, all right. Fredo.
Mm-hmm.
What rebel leader announces that the shuttle Tydirium was stolen by the Alliance?
Oh, jeez. I'm trying to remember if it's... Okay, stab in the dark.
And
General...
you get double points if you can get his first name.
No, I'm not getting his first name. It's I'm going to go with General Nadine.
I will accept that as Maydeen with an M, but I always thought it was Nadine with an N until like about 2 years ago.
Okay.
But Dave, can you get his first name for extra special double points?
Is it Crix?
It is Crix. You are the nerd.
I knew that. I only knew that because of Dark Forces.
That's what I was just thinking. I was saying, like, I should know this because you rescue him in Dark Forces.
Doesn't make you any less nerdy.
That's true. That is true.
Why didn't you name your son Crix? You named him Nate. Why didn't you name him Crix?
Well, it just rolls off the tongue.
So, all right. Well, yeah, it's kind of like here. They're changing the name of Dixie beer, and people are wanting to change it to Dix because that's what that was a French currency or whatever. It's like Yeah, that's a really good name to give any product. Sure, that'd be just wonderful. Yeah.
Aaron, you've just inspired me. I may Photoshop a picture of Crixnade's head onto a can of Dixie beer.
I
Yeah.
tweeted out that they should just call it beer because it tastes like plain label beer, so they might as well just call it beer. All right. So for me, who does C3PO lecture screaming about it can't help you? Screaming about it can't help you. I know what my gut wants to say. I'm going to say Chewbacca. It is Chewbacca. I don't remember him saying the word screaming. That was talking about the chess match, right?
Right. The hollow chest.
So I don't remember screaming, but anyway. All right. Well, it is Chewbacca. Cool. All right.
Well, it could be very much like General Madine versus General Nadine. So you
by
just
the way,
hear.
so I watched Solo. Speaking of Solo, I watched Solo on Disney Plus the other day. Anybody watched it yet on Disney Plus?
Not yet.
Subtitles gone.
What?
Subtitles weren't there. There was no subtitles when Moloch was talking, and Brittany and I were looking at each other like, did we dream these? And no subtitles. And then when Han is talking Shriwook, no subtitles. And so the next day I actually tweeted at John Hoey, who's one of the guys on the Resistance broadcast podcast I listen to, and they're the ones who are really pushing the Make Solo 2 happen. They created that hashtag and everything. And I said, dude, we're watching, Solo and no subtitles. Did that happen to you as well? And he's like, yeah. And he mentioned somebody who worked on the Solo project that they have interviewed and said, yeah, I think he's on that. So this isn't part of the news, but I do find it interesting that, along with McClunky, makes me wonder: are we hurrying? There's some sloppiness with some of this content getting up on Disney Plus, or will there be more sloppiness? Because to put up an alternate edit of the Greedo thing, I mean, that's never been in any release, and then to have no subtitles. I don't know. Is there some sloppiness going on?
Well, I don't know that I would call it sloppiness per se, because this is a conscientious choice they're making. This isn't just you're taking, where you're cutting something off at a particular moment, a second to ahead. You're removing things from the movie as it was released, or in the case of McClunky, you're making a clear-cut addition to what's happening.
I would have to believe, though, that the subtitles, it's kind of like a layered track. You got the video, and then so they grabbed the wrong file. They grabbed the file that didn't have the subtitle track on top of it, or somebody slipped and did something. I don't know. It could just be, it's COVID and our temp isn't there, and we're screwed up. But I just find it interesting now that there's been 2 releases, and we get, like I said, we get McClunky and we get no subtitles. Now, that being said, I've seen Solo a bunch of times, but I didn't miss the subtitles, except that they weren't there. It was like, could still get the gist of what was going on. But anyway.
My first thought was that it might have been closed captioning related. So if you turn the subtitles on, all of a sudden you're going to get that again for like the alien speak parts. But it seems kind of silly to be forced into having subtitles on for the entire length of the movie just to get those scenes to appear the way you want them to. So it's a little bit of an odd thing.
But and again, it's maybe, I know I'm jumping off about 2 bridges and a cliff at the same time. But it kind of goes back to the John Boyega quote where he said, don't Disney Plus me, when they're talking about, like putting some show, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel or whatever, putting on a Disney Plus is somehow a step lower than if it's, or it's not as serious of a project, or maybe it's like high school football versus college football, or college football versus pro football, type of a deal. But is there going to be some, it's just Disney Plus, no big deal that we have McClunky in there. It's just Disney Plus, no big deal that we, I don't know.
I don't necessarily think that it'd be no big deal, because ultimately, as we're moving forward, streaming is becoming the mechanism through which a lot of the media is being consumed right now. I mean, if you go into my living room, you'll still see 3 towers of DVDs. Now, that's 20 years ago's technology. The idea of having a room full of DVDs is kind of like when you used to have, if you think of something like High Fidelity, a wall full of LPs. Now, some people will have them, but most people will just settle for a monthly subscription of Spotify. Right. Well, exactly. You're a rare person who has all these records. Most people currently will just buy a subscription to Spotify or Apple Music or Google Play Music or whatever, and they'll consume it that way. So it can have an effect. I mean, just look at the way that stuff changed from VHS through Laserdisc to DVD to Blu-ray. Every time they've moved to a different medium, there's been little tweaks and cleanups and polishes and changes. So it's just
and I didn't mean to hijack this. This is just something I just noticed. It was kind of interesting. But you're talking about upgrades, where I'm talking about
changes. Well, that's what I mean.
Downgrades or mistakes. It's as speaking as somebody who, when I just hit my microphone, sorry, that's going to be awful. But speaking as somebody who, it's like the minute I hit publish, I know there are going to be thousands of people reading what I just wrote. And if I miss a period somewhere, I'm mortified. Now imagine putting a Star Wars movie, on a streaming service, and it's like, you'd think you'd want to have all the I's dotted and tight T's crossed. So now I'm going to step back from the bridge and the cliff and everything like that. But this is now 2. I'm going to be, let's see what happens if there will ever be a 3rd. But it just seems like there's I don't know it, and I'm not saying it's maybe not sloppiness, but mistakes, because maybe you're hurrying or something. I don't know, but maybe it'd be interesting to see if we can find out who could tell us why. How does a subtitle track not get? I don't know. Just
if these are mistakes, to your point, like I'm the same way as you. I'm mortified if something slips out that mistake. But I also know that that's much likelier to happen if I don't have enough sets of eyes looking at it. Like if it's just me responsible for this thing. So it makes me wonder, is that the scenario that we're dealing with here, where it's just, like you said, like some intern in a back room somewhere who's responsible for digitizing everything and getting
grab the wrong tape. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you never know, but it is interesting, and I love the comparison to digital music, and like you said, Aaron, like sometimes you're dealing with the opposite issue, which is quote unquote upgrades. This is a better version of that song, but a lot of people default to LPs because it's a different sound, and and we go back and forth on the Star Wars changes over the years, and how it affects people's enjoyment of the movies. And I'm curious, is it as big of an issue in the music industry? Because you could probably get 3 guys in our position doing a music podcast who would tell you, oh, the digital music problems, they make this change and that change, and this album is different because of this, and it's probably just as bad or
we'll have a side episode and have my brother back on. He'll be able to walk you through all that, I guarantee you.
Easiest way to ask any Beatlemaniac as their music has, the Beatles' music has gone through the different mediums, and they'll be able to not just tell you where there was upgrades, but where there was downgrades, because they are sticklers for that.
Actually, yeah, we should have my brother and Lynn because I think they're the biggest connoisseurs of
Nope.
vinyl that I know. So, all right. Well, anyway, like I said, I didn't mean to hijack that, but I just found it interesting. So yeah, now you're going to want to go watch Solo and see if the subtitles are there. But actually, I'll tell you, it actually made the scene with Chewbacca and Han even more enjoyable because you don't know what Han is saying, but he says, "Yeah, I speak a bit," and so they're having this conversation. So it's like makes you wonder why they put in subtitles in the first place. Anyway, I digress. Fredo, we got a bunch of news this week. It's been a busy week.
Yeah. So actually, jumping off of the Solo discussion because, well, since it's a good place to start, Alden Ehrenreich, who played Han Solo in Solo: A Star Wars Story, was interviewed by Esquire and was asked about the possibility of reprising the role. So first of all, he says that it depends on what it is. It depends on how it's done and how it feels to the story. So if it feels innate.
Can I pause you there for a second? It's like how many projects are beating down Alden Ehrenreich's door right now that he's going to go, well, it depends on the story. I'm sorry, if Lucasfilm comes and says we want you to do Han Solo, you sign that paper and you do it.
Well, to be fair, yeah, I mean, look, everybody is always working. That's just it. And I imagine that after what happened with Solo, I mean, he's got a TV series, he's got a couple of other stuff coming. But after what happened with Solo, he's going to want to make sure that if he jumps back in, it's the right thing because he's going to get it again from fans who are not necessarily happy that it wasn't Harrison Ford. So anyway, he was asked about a potential Solo sequel, hashtag make Solo 2 happen. And he says that officially there's nothing going on right now. At the same time, he has heard some stuff, and that's his quote. I've heard some rumors, I've heard some stuff, but nothing.
Yeah, he elongates this some stuff. Yeah,
right, but nothing concrete yet. So, and you got to figure, they didn't cast this guy to do a one-off. They were probably hoping that either they could go movie trilogy or movie series or
wasn't the
TV
original
show.
Wasn't the original release that he was signed for 3?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was. So they were hoping for more than just a single movie. But obviously the box office results kind of kiboshed that. But, you never can tell, in regards to Star Wars and the possibility of coming back around to stuff.
Well, I'd be all in because watching that again, I was still like, he did such a good job at capturing just the subtleties of what Harrison Ford did with Han Solo, the points and the inflections in the voice and stuff like that without being a carbon copy. And it's just a fun movie. So I'm all in. I'm all in on that one.
I agree. It would be a lot of fun. I was intrigued enough by the cliffhanger with the cameo and everything to think, oh, well, where's this gonna go? I was really interested in seeing what they wanted to do with it. And
it's like National Treasure 2.
Hey, look, those movies were fun. I don't care what anybody says.
I agree. I love that. And actually, National Treasure 3 is coming to Disney Plus, from what I understand. So, yes, Nick Cage. All right. Anyway, sorry.
Speaking of Han Solo, then right quick, just a quick happy birthday to Harrison Ford. He celebrated his 78th birthday this past Monday.
Yeah, I had one of those moments on Twitter that I almost had to post the Denzel Washington GIF, because I saw Harrison Ford was trending. And when it was like, 7 o'clock in the morning, I was like, no, he can't. And it was just his birthday. So, yeah. How old again?
78. And they're still, a year from now, supposedly, Indiana Jones 5 is supposed to be coming out. So, a spry 78. He's not stopping now.
2 years older or 1 year older than my dad. Yeah. So.
Yeah, he's about 4 years older than my dad.
You know what was weird about that news was that, like, I think Patrick Stewart was having a birthday on the same day. I had no idea that Patrick Stewart and Harrison Ford had the same birthday. It's like geek heaven right there.
Yeah. Next bit of news, there was an interview with Giancarlo Esposito. I think he was just cast in as obviously the villain in the next game in the Far Cry series. So talking about it with Entertainment Tonight. They also got into talk about regarding his role as Moff Gideon. So obviously they asked him about that final shot, that final scene in season 1 of The Mandalorian and him having the Darksaber. To which he says, here I'll quote him, "To be in the position of having that regal, graceful power, but have this saber which delineates a different part of me than any other character. To have this saber means I can use it and I can do my own dirty work. I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior, that's part of me. It also creates a possibility that he's one of the ones. He possibly has that, and to me, it's interesting because it's really that fallen hero. Is he a descendant of Darth Vader? Who is he? What does he want?" So he knows all about everything, and you'll have to wait to find out. And he's actually pretty good with the Darksaber too. End quote. So make of that what you will.
You know, could he be a descendant of the first Mandalorian Jedi? Was it Tar Vizsla?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's going to have to be something that's explained. Everybody's going to have to do their homework, but you know, that's a possibility. Now, when I saw this one thing, this is just a tangent thought. Could it be that it was Moff Gideon who was at the end of the Gunslinger episode?
You
Long
mean
take.
Spurs? I didn't notice Spurs on him, but
But maybe in Tatooine he needed the spurs to, you know, kick the dewback or something. I don't know, but I think we're making too big a deal out of the Spurs. But anyway, I mean,
you can never make too big a deal out of the Spurs. Yeah, I mean maybe, but I think that would be disappointing because he's already been revealed. So it's kind of fun to still have that out there and still wonder who it could be. So.
Yeah. But getting to the maybe possible Force abilities,
mm-hmm.
You know, they have the it could be either way path because they've shown Sabine able to wield a lightsaber and a dark saber without, you know, having Force abilities. But the fact that his character does say that the child, Baby Yoda, is more important to him than they know.
Mm-hmm. Part of me was thinking when, as I was reading that, sorry, I talked about. It was thinking, could he be a fallen Jedi? Could he have been a Jedi in training before the Empire, and he just went to hiding and then just came back as an Imperial officer, and he's kept that hidden?
There could be also connections to Rise of Skywalker, right? Where, I mean, at the same time, you know, Palpatine is being hooked up to hoses somewhere, you know, on Exegol. So it's like he might be a Sith disciple. He could be a former, you know, Sith Inquisitor. It could be any. But the fact that it's, you know, I guess, yeah, it's in the Mandalorian series, so having the Darksaber makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, this.
It creates a whole new dynamic for a character that we know very little of.
Yeah, we know nothing about him. So
yeah. So there's not going to be any nice segue to this one, so I'm just going to dive right in. Everybody knows by now that I believe it was Monday as well that former MythBusters host Grant Imahara passed away. I believe it was eventually determined that it was a brain aneurysm that took his life at age 49. And he was a graduate of Southern Cal, you know, USC, an electrical engineer, spent years working at Industrial Light and Magic. He actually, Star Wars put a nice picture of him working on the set of in the prequels as working because he used to operate R2-D2. He also did work for Terminator 3, Lost World, Matrix sequels, and then a number of other things before jumping on into MythBusters. So
It's just that is always just so sad when anybody passes away that young. But when you watch MythBusters, he was one of those that everybody on that show, but he in particular, it's like you just saw so much joy in what he did. I mean, some people have a job, some people do a job, and some people love their job. And he just, you could tell that anything he did, it was just totally geeking out over it. So, yeah, that was really sad news.
Doesn't it feel like we're doing too many of these, especially with the pandemic going on and everything else? It's just seems like the frequency of these kinds of stories seems to be going up. Maybe it's just because we're older.
Well, and I think we're more susceptible to picking up on them. It's one of those things, if you were a fan of the show, obviously it hits you. If you didn't know his connections to Star Wars, which I think that was one of the things I most appreciated, how ILM and Star Wars and the Star Wars community just jumped up to say he was one of our own, even before MythBusters, even before everything. He was one of our guys, and it's amazing how at the moment when we're more willing to look for those connections with people, even if they're far away and we may not get to know them. So it impacts people on a personal level. But it's surprising how more cognizant we are of people passing away, and especially the ages. We start going like, oh my gosh, that's 49 is barely it's a life, but it's we're still going like, no, there was plenty more left for him to do. So anyway, our condolences to his family. All right. From there, I will try to jump into happier news if it can be, because the last bit of news that was announced this week was, it seemed like everything came out on Monday, was The Bad Batch was officially announced. So this is from Star Wars' own website. Disney Plus order its next animated series from Lucasfilm, Star Wars: The Bad Batch. So fresh of appearing in the season 7 of Clone Wars, Disney Plus is requesting a series based on the clones of The Bad Batch, and it's supposed to come in sometime in 2021. From the piece, I'll just quote right quick. It's supposed to take place in the post-Clone War era as they take on mercenary missions, and struggle to stay afloat and find new purpose.
So I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody was speculating it's going to be one of the podcasts. So I apologize for not citing where I heard this, but the possibility that we could get a little bit of Darth Maul in this one. Because if you're talking about that post, to explain a little bit of how Maul, maybe this is the vehicle. It's not about the Bad Batch per se, but we're going to get a little bit of Maul to figure out how to bridge his story between Clone Wars and Rebels. It's really kind of interesting. I think actually, Dave, we need to put this on the calendar, and we just need to prognosticate and think what we think this series is going to be, and then come back to it once it's finally released. Because it's set up to be the A-Team. The way Fredo, you just mentioned it, mercenary missions. I mean, you got Wrecker, who is like BA. You got it seems like the A-Team.
In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from a maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune.
Yeah. And I just said the Star Wars A-Team. That sounds awesome. Just from the standpoint of my 80s child brain just going like the A-Team in the Star Wars universe. That sounds perfect. But also because you're right, we haven't seen this time period. We saw the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars took us to the rise of the Empire. We've seen Rebels, which takes us right before we get to the Rebellion. But those immediate days and moments right after the Empire's founded, we have not gotten to see them in full. So this will give us our first serious glimpse.
Yeah, we get Solo. Solo's in that time period.
But Solo happens years after the Empire's established.
Yeah.
I'm talking about those immediate moments a year after Clone Wars ends, and now it's the Empire.
It's probably going to be a cheap series for them to put together because it only requires one guy to do the voices because one guy does all the voices for the clones. So,
I give them a little extra for all that.
I've stopped saying my line of I really didn't need to see this series or that series. So it'll be interesting it's more Star Wars. So that's happy. I'm kind of surprised that that's the animated series that they released there that they announced, given the other ones that have been rumored. And yeah, so one's rumor, one's fact. But anyway.
But do you think it gives them an opportunity to still keep a lot of the same actors, same characters? Because this could give them an opportunity to continue having characters like Cad Bane and Asajj Ventress pop up here and there, because you're talking about that underworld that gets built underneath the Empire running around.
Yeah.
I'm with you guys. In terms of I'm in. And it has a lot of storytelling possibilities, but I also saw somebody online posit this question, which I thought was interesting. Is who amongst that show, in terms of who appeared in Clone Wars, would you want to have their own series? And would the Bad Batch be near the top of that list for you? And I thought about that for a little bit, and I don't think the Bad Batch would probably even be in my top 10.
But see, that's why I think I agree with you, Dave, and that's why I'm kind of convincing myself that they're a vehicle to tell other stories that don't coalesce. It's going to allow them to do like a Darth Maul story, to do a Cad Bane story, to do a Asajj Ventress story, kind of like you're talking about, Fredo. That none of these. It's like you have all these short stories, and so if you just have the one common thread of, we got to do a mission on this planet now, and then we get to learn more about some other person that was in the Clone Wars, so that you couldn't stretch to an entire series. So I'm totally with you, but that's why I have to think it's a vehicle of some sort.
That makes sense.
Well, and when you consider just from the standpoint of just from the clone story, we know that at some point they are going to be replaced by the stormtroopers, and we know that we've seen Rex, and actually we're going to discuss that. Seeing Rex and some of the other clones when they reappear on our universe in Rebels, but we know that there must have been a point where the clones were no longer viable for the Empire. We might get to see that story. We might get to see some of those clones who didn't follow Order 66 and see what happened to them.
That's the story. That's the story I hope they lead with, is how Order 66 affected them if they were quote unquote defected, and a Bad Batch. Did their
chips not work,
or did they just go, I have a headache, type of thing? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. So
yeah, but it's good. Ultimately, it's interesting because you got to figure they opened up season 7 with them. They have to have that in the back of their heads.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It totally feels like they were shoehorned in there for this purpose to keep the story going. And
now that whole arc of the Bad Batch, they had already basically had all the episodes laid out in animatic form and in kind of rough. So this was something they were planning on doing when the Clone Wars series got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it was in season 7. And then I think your point, Dave, I think that was, maybe after the success of the episodes. I don't know.
No, but that also that Dave Filoni had mentioned that they had a number of ideas for season 7. So the fact that they brought this one up and they said, okay, we know we want to tell the Siege of Mandalore. We know we want to tell where Ahsoka is. And then they went, okay, and we want to tell the Bad Batch arc. So those are the ones that they picked out of all the ideas that they had for a possible season 7.
Yeah, but again, they were already like about 50 to 60% done. They already had vocal tracks, they already had scripts written, they already had, like I said, the previs done. So I think, not to be the cynical jerk on this show, but I think it was more about, hey, what can we put up as content quickly and cheaply? Oh, well, here we've got, we only have to spend this amount of money to finish these things up. I think that's why the Bad Batch is
in season
in season 7, because it was mostly done, and that's why I think the Clone Wars season 7 was actually one of the things in Disney Plus, not because Disney thought it was going to be this huge flipping hit. Again, that's just me being cynical. I mean, they had this. It's like you go to Prince when he was alive, and it's like, hey, we need an album. All right, well, I've got a vault full of stuff that I've recorded and produced and everything. Just throw this out, All right, the record company didn't have to spend a dime. Here we go. So,
Yeah, but I would be cynical in a maybe slightly different way and suggest again that they were a vehicle more than anything else to bridge into a new series. In The Simpsons, where they introduced Poochie. It kind of reeked of that at the time, and now it's like, oh, lo and behold, they're going to get their own series, and it's like, of course they are. But that all having been said, we're all still eating it up with a spoon. We still love it, and it's still great stuff. So it's just, I can see through it for what it is, but I also still enjoy it.
So that's pretty much it for news this week.
No, there's one last bit of news. It says rumor, but next to it, your second bullet point there.
Oh, well, hold on a sec. There was a rumor, and I'm sorry, I almost forgot.
Hi, kids. I'm Hayden Christensen.
Very much so. So, okay, again, big pinch of salt, and we probably should limit ourselves to one rumor a week, because otherwise they're like potato chips. You start eating them all and believing them all. So the rumor is that Hayden Christensen, yes, Anakin Skywalker, has been cast in the upcoming Disney Plus Kenobi series. Now the thing is, he's not being cast as a cameo. He's not going to be a one-off. He's being cast as a regular member of the cast. So he's going to have multiple scenes in this show, 6-episode series.
This is true. It's giving credence to my argument that this is going to be a flashback show. You're going to see, Ewan McGregor walking around Tatooine, and something's going to trigger a memory, and boom, he and Anakin are off on some, some story.
By the way, from the story here, reading it says, based on the growing love of the prequel and the popularity of the Clone Wars, which we always have to say, Dave Filoni and the Clone Wars did such an amazing job rescuing the characters of the prequels and making them that much fuller and richer so that people want to see more of them. So it makes sense that, hey, Hayden's still around now. I mean, does he still look like he did back 15 years ago? I don't know. Hope he does.
Yeah, but with all this de-aging stuff that they made Samuel L. Jackson look like 30 years younger when in Captain Marvel. Yeah, there's things they can do.
That is true.
This actually makes me when I hear things like this, I really hope that this is true, because it makes me more excited about an Obi-Wan series.
It might be I don't even know what to say to it, because honestly, I don't know how to comment on it without knowing what it will look like. Mm-hmm. I mean, if they're bringing him on just to wear the suit, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you can pretty much cast anybody with a large frame in that role.
So one of the things that I'd heard was, and I've kind of thought about this too. What is Obi-Wan doing on Tatooine at this time? He's watching over Luke, and he's also training to become, to become a Force ghost. So he's going to have to be dealing with a lot of his issues. If you remember that episode, that arc from the Clone Wars season 6, where Yoda, starts going through this training. He has to deal with his hubris. He has to deal, with his, with just it's like Yoda went to therapy, type of a thing. And so there's a ton of guilt that Obi-Wan is dealing with for failing Anakin. And so it makes total sense to me that, as he's going through this training, he's taken back to a time where and maybe it's just a conversation. Maybe it's not he and Anakin off on some, grand adventure, but it's a conversation that we never saw. It's, an interaction that we never heard of. Maybe it is some mission that they did. So I could see, Anakin being, Hayden Christensen being in this episode totally as a memory or flashback. I don't think it's going to have a Vader suit at all, but
Yeah, no, because what's interesting is, due to the fact that the prequels were made we only got Hayden as Anakin in 2 movies. And in both of those movies, he really only spends a certain amount of time with Obi-Wan. He spends the first third and the last third of Attack of the Clones, and then he spends probably about the first 2/3, half of episode 3 with Obi-Wan before they have to go their separate ways, and they don't see each other again until the final duel. So the opportunity to kind of get to see more of that master and apprentice, to put it in Dave's favorite book terms, relationship, get that opportunity to kind of flesh that relationship out, because the one that old Ben tells Luke is one that's warm. He has warm memories of Anakin, despite everything that happens.
And again, Jedi therapy, but he got to that point at some point. At the end of Revenge of the Sith,
Yeah,
he's in a totally different place. So this makes me more excited for the Obi-Wan series, because I think that's a far more interesting story than Obi-Wan coming into town, a wamping and a whooping, Tusken Raiders who are, about ready to threaten the Lars homestead. Sure, that can still happen, but not on a freaking weekly basis. It's like, so to get into what's in Obi-Wan's head, probably the most failed character, in the Star Wars story, and how he dealt with that. That's an interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The second that you see, there's just so much potential for, kind of alluding to what Fredo was saying, there's so much potential for him to, you see that in live action, that relationship of the two, because we talked about doing the homework. Oh, you got to go and you got to watch the Clone Wars, and you got to watch Rebels, and you got to do this and that. And it's like some people are they're only interested in the live action stuff, and some people are only interested in the movies. And so it's kind of like, well, okay, if people fall into that particular camp, it would make sense to kind of give them more of that relationship if they haven't seen it. And there's probably a significant number of people who have never sat through the Clone Wars and watched all those episodes and seen that relationship develop over time. So it makes a lot of sense to for his character too, because you could tell a story from his past, from Obi-Wan's past, that has personal relevance for him in the now. And you can have it involve Hayden because they were so close at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes sense for a lot of reasons. And yeah, I would not cast him just to put him in the suit.
Speaking of which, just right quick, Spencer Wildling is the actor who was in the suit for Rogue One. So I would imagine he's the dude at 6'7". He also played the guard that took Peter Quill's Walkman in Guardians. So I would imagine if you're going to get somebody in the Vader suit, that's who's going to be in the Vader suit. It's not going to be Hayden. I think George was deferential to Hayden for episode 3, but 15 years down the line, they may go, no, Hayden, we don't need you in the suit. We're not going to get as much out of it.
Well, this stuff better get released soon because I'm getting excited about it. So Well, that was a lot of
That's
news
all.
for this week, but that was, I mean, good conversations about what could be, and it brings me back to, I wish somebody would go on the record on some of these things to, make us even more excited about things. Of course, how many of these would have been announced at Star Wars Celebration, this coming month, or at Comic-Con?
They
So
make
I
that
think
they make that point in the Hayden Christensen rumor, saying, he's been out and about, he's made it to a few events. So if you're going to announce his return, whether it was, Comic Con or no
it would have had to have
Celebration,
been Celebration, because
yeah,
when everybody was looking at, every time Celebration comes, it's like, for a movie is coming out, nothing was coming out at this point. It's like, why are you having Celebration? It's just a Star Wars convention, so this would be the announcement that would make everybody just go blah,
right.
So anyway, so we talked a little bit about Clone Wars, and so let's talk about the Clone Wars sequel, kinda. This week we're going to be talking about Rebels Season 2. Remember, a few weeks back we went through Season 1, had a lengthy discussion on that. This is going to be a spoilery discussion, so if you haven't seen Season 2, recommend you walking away now, because we're going to get into it's going to be no holds barred. We're not going to bleep anything out except for my swear words. So you're going to know about the cameos and things like that, which this season was full of. Anyway, first of all, let's just go around the horn here real quick. Compared to Season 1, what were your thoughts to Season 2? Did you thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways? Did you feel like, yeah, this was even better than Season 1, or it was a letdown, or yeah, it was another season of Rebels? What'd you think?
I really enjoyed it. What's funny about it is, if I would critique it for anything, it's that it seemed like it was getting to the end point quickly. Like, a lot happens in this season, and there are a lot of things that they lay into this season that they don't necessarily pay off right away, but they are going to pay off, and we know that, having watched the entire series. So
Yeah, we've seen the whole match. Yeah,
it's just a very, very eventful series of events, and it all feels so significant. And I'm sure y'all might have different feelings about it. There might be a few episodes. We always talk about the dreaded filler, but so much of this to me just felt important. And so, like, episode, I guess I would classify Season 1 as being like fun and intriguing, and it kind of tries to like bring you into the fold, and then Season 2 just punches you in the face repeatedly, because it's just, there's a lot going on here, but I love it.
Yeah.
cool. Fredo?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I would say I agree with everything Dave said regarding its quality. I think it gets even better than Season 1. I mean, there's a concerted effort on the part of Dave Filoni and the Rebels writers to make it even bigger. I mean, obviously, for one, we get, I believe it's 7 more episodes here. And it's not just that there's more episodes in this season, it's that they're more connected. We get fewer of those one-off, like we did with the Lando episode in Season 1. We get fewer of those episodes. We get more episodes that call back to one another, even just a few episodes down the line. They're building bigger story threads that are meant to run the full length of the season, and that will continue on beyond Season 2.
So I'm going to give a rundown of all the episodes. Again, it's going to be like mainly a 2-word synopsis of what happens in each one of these episodes. But however, my thoughts was that the Season 2 felt a lot more Star Wars-ish than Season 1, and it's because of the connections, if you will, from Disney Gallery. So let's just hit it. Episodes 1 and 2 it's a two-part episode, a two-part thing. It's the Siege of Lothal, and Darth Vader is screwing with the rebels. And it's James Earl Jones as the voice. And by the way, here's the other thing that I really dug about season 2. It was so inspired by Ralph McQuarrie. So all of those Ralph McQuarrie sketches that we saw, around New Hope, there are so many of those references in here. And Vader is stylized just like a Ralph McQuarrie picture. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I don't know who made that call, but I remember I remember at the time they were watching some behind the scenes thing about that, and they referenced that point. It wasn't just something that we're making up here. It's just, they did reference those McQuarrie drawings, and you can see it time and time and time again, and it's just a really cool Easter egg for longtime fans.
So episodes 3 and 4, we get with Captain Rex and some other clones. So the clones are back in town, if you will, and that's Lost Commanders and Relics of the Old Republic. Episode 5, always 2 there are. This is where we get introduced to a new Sith Inquisitor, and it's ironically voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who is the wife of Freddie Prinze Jr., who's Kanan. So it's always kind of fun when they get to interact on this show. Brothers of the Broken Horn is where we bring back Hondo Ohnaka from Clone Wars, and Hondo is a totally different Hondo than he was, from the Clone Wars. So it's kind of interesting. But Ezra, he becomes kind of a pseudo mentor to Ezra. Then we have Wings of the Master, and that's all about Hera and her. And actually, that's season 2. Is you get a lot, especially here in the middle, a lot of individuals. We're building on the stories of individuals. So Ezra has his story. Sabine has her story. Hera has hers, and the Wings of the Master is Hera's. It's they get a special aircraft for the rebellion. Blood Sisters, that's Sabine, who is meeting up with her former friend and bounty hunter Ketsu. Stealth Strike is Rex and Kanan butting heads and eventually becoming friends. And because Kanan was distrustful of clones, and Rex just didn't like somebody who didn't like him. Legacy was when we're back to Ezra, and he gets a vision that his parents are still alive, and we also get introduced to Ryder Azadi in that episode. So again, some of these that people criticize in the moment of being filler, if you look down to season 4, or into later seasons, you see why these were made sense. Except for this next one, A Princess on Lothal. I think this one only exists just so that we could have a Princess Leia that kind of felt like Princess Leia, but really didn't feel like Princess Leia to me. But anyway, Princess Leia is in this episode. And we'll talk about any of these that we want to a little bit later. The Protector of Conquered Dawn, that brings us to the Mandalorian. What's his name?
Fenn Rau.
Fenn Rau, thank you. And it just starts to build up the Mandalorian story, which becomes very important in later seasons. Legends of Lasat, that is what happened to Zeb's people, and also we talked about that with Kallus a little bit earlier. The Call, that's where we learn about hyperspace whales.
The Purrgil. The Purrgil.
Kind of weird, but again, this one is more about Ezra connecting with the Force. But yes, hyperspace whales. Homecoming is another Hera episode because we bring back her dad, Cham Syndulla, and so they're anyway, the honorable ones, we have Zeb and Callus are stranded together outside of Geonosis, on a moon of Geonosis, and it's kind of one of those. I don't know. They learn to respect one another. They build a bond.
Did you ever see the movie Enemy Mine from
Yes,
back in
yep.
the 80s? That's exactly what I thought of seeing that episode.
Shroud of Darkness was one of my favorites because it's when Ezra and Kanan and Ahsoka go to the Jedi Temple on Lothal, and all of them are having visions all over the place. Ezra's talking to Yoda. Kanan is dealing with temple guards, and he actually becomes a Jedi Master or Jedi Knight, whatever. And Ahsoka is dealing with her issues with Anakin. Next one is also kind of one of those, maybe it was criticized as a filler, and it's kind of hard not to argue with that. But the Forgotten Droid, we get P5, is that right?
AP5.
AP5. Alan Rickman in a droid costume, basically.
He's so great.
Yeah.
It's a fun episode. It's tough to see where the overall arc, is there. The Mystery of Chopper Base, again, another big Ralph McQuarrie inspired thing where they have to deal with space spiders. And then the last two episodes is Twilight of the Apprentice. Such a great episode, with the exception of helicopter lightsabers. When I first saw that, I may have swore out loud. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. But Twilight of the Apprentice, at the end of this, you see Vader and Ahsoka fight, and man, it was so good. So those were 22 episodes in season 2. So I guess I'm sorry, Fredo, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in slight defense of helicopter lightsabers,
there's no defense for helicopter lightsabers.
No. The one defense is gonna say they do pay it off. They keep setting it up as an idea, and then they find a way to come around and have it bite the Inquisitors in the butt, namely the 10th brother, because he tries flying away, it doesn't work, and he falls to his death. So
anyway, all right. So of all those, there's no defense for helicopter lightsabers. For those of you who are wondering, if you've never seen the Sith Inquisitors, they have double-bladed lightsabers that then spin at the hilt, which, grand. But then, so of course, you just hold it up above your head and you fly away like Mary Poppins, apparently. And it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So of all those, which what were the highlights and probably most important episodes for you guys? And there's 22 of them, so you can't pick all 22. But what's your go-to for season 2?
For me, obviously the ones who bringing back Rex, so the Lost Commanders, Relics of the Old Republic, and then later on, which is the one where Rex and Kanan go to rescue them. Oh, Stealth Strike, which is I love the moment where Rex and Kanan bond, where it's like, wait, is that the same? Is that the same shuttle? No, I think it's a different shuttle. It's the same shuttle. We just stole it again.
Why do they keep letting us steal these things? I think that was the line. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it was fun seeing Rex as the more grizzled, chubby, old salty dog kind of character, as opposed after seeing him for so many seasons being the standard by the book clone commander or clone captain that we'd seen Sam grow up with. So those were fun for me. Obviously, Protector of Concord Dawn, in terms of its impact for the Mandalorian story that we follow through this series and into the Mandalorian, can't be discounted. And then the other one that I was gonna mention right quick was where is it? It's Shroud of Darkness, because it's that idea of, and I love, first of all, two things I love out of that episode: the knighting ceremony for Kanan, that is taken out of the old Clone Wars series. That by the right of the council, by the will of the Force, that was taken from Genndy Tartakovsky's series, season 2, when Anakin gets knighted. That they lift that straight off, and I love the fact that it's now become the de facto knighting of a Jedi. But also just the idea of in that that they also bring in Malachor, and if you never played Knights of the Old Republic 2, you don't know what Malachor is. But I love the fact that they somehow find a way to make that canon, by bringing the idea of the Battle of Malachor that happened millennia ago, and that it's not a person, it's a place. So those are some of the episodes that I like. I love the interconnectedness that this season builds with the grander Star Wars mythos, so to speak.
So I'll jump in real quick because I'm not going to talk about many of them. I did skip one episode. I apologize. Episode 10 was the future of the Force, and where they are protecting Force-sensitive children,
Mhm.
So that was a really interesting, because I think we hear that the Jedi were extinct, but that doesn't mean the Force stopped. There are still people who are still kids who were Force sensitive and had abilities, and and what became of those kids, and what were those, what's their story. That was, so it is a very important important episode. But the ones that my go-to, like I said, these are I like them all, but if I'm going to open up Disney Plus and it's like I want to watch a Rebels episode, if I'm in season 2, it's probably either going to be Twilight of the Apprentice, which, by the way, we bring back Darth Maul, and Shroud of Darkness. Because for me, the Jedi, Sith struggle, that's just interesting. That's my favorite Star Wars story. And those really get into but it also gets into just that conflict and the story of Anakin and Ahsoka, for basically soulmates who are, and Ahsoka dealing with the fact that this person who was her hero and her mentor is now the most evil person, and it's that denial that she knows that Anakin is Vader, from the beginning of, back at the first episodes, because Seeds of the Fall is actually one that I will watch over and over again as well. She knows at that point that Anakin and Vader, are the same.
She can't come to grips with it. She can't come to admit it for herself. It's not until she gets the Shroud of Darkness that she finally accepts it.
But the lightsaber duel in Twilight of the Apprentice is just one of the best in Star Wars. So those are my go-to episodes. Like I said, when I was going through them, there's not many that I could, and we'll talk about ones we could do without later. But all of these, if you've seen the entire series, you can see where their place was on the chessboard, with the exception of a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Dave?
One of the ones that I really like, and it wasn't like overly important in the overall tapestry, but it's Wings of the Master, which featured the debut of the B-Wing.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that so fun to watch, because you kind of watch these, over the course of watching the movies, you see these new vehicles appear and these new types of characters appear, and you're thinking, well, where were they before? And I always love it when they can kind of go in and tell us the backstory. It's like, why weren't there any B-Wings on the first Death Star attack? Well, they were still developing it. And so, like, just getting to see some of the backstory behind that was really, really cool. I love it when they do that right. They connect things and they give us a deeper understanding of something that we hadn't had before. And so that was a really effective episode in that way. And then of course, the final two, episodes, Twilight of the Apprentice. And for the reasons that you guys have stated, but we barely talked about Maul. This is Maul's reappearance, right? And just everybody, just that moment. The first time I watched it, was just I had not sat through Clone Wars at that point. I had known that Maul returned in Clone Wars, but I had not watched that arc. So I didn't know if he died or whatever at the end of that. And it turns out they'd left that kind of open originally. But I didn't have any expectation that he would ever show up in this series. And then he did. And that was monumental at the time. And then for him to betray Kanan in the way that he did, and for Ezra's missteps to result in Kanan paying for his misdeeds and losing his eyesight, to me, that's just heartbreaking. And you juxtapose that with Kanan's steadfastness throughout those episodes of we're a team, this duo stays together, or whatever his words were to that effect, which is like, we're a combo, we're a pair. And he had been such a reluctant trainer initially, and for him to grow to that point of feeling responsible for Ezra's training, and for him to feel such affection for him, to be devoted to him, and then for Ezra to just turn around and sort of flirt with Maul, and then for him to lose his eyesight as a result of Ezra's mistakes. I mean, that's really heartbreaking stuff.
So, let's talk about something here real quick. How did the Rebels keep giving Ezra so much responsibility with as much as he screwed up in this, especially this season? Because let's see, he puts them in. I mean, he puts them in jeopardy. In the future of the Force, because he tells the little kid, "Hey, you want to come stay with us where we're hiding the entire Rebel fleet?" And he gets, so they get found out that way. Then there's the but he's always screwing up. And I know he's a kid, but he's always screwing up. But hey, we're just going to keep giving you more responsibility, Ezra. It's like, at some point, no, give us your lightsaber back. You're sitting in the corner for the next 4 episodes, and let Zeb do things for a while. I don't know. It's just
but you know what it is? It's in part it's reflecting of where the rebellion is at that point. They're not they're not an army. They're coming together. That's one of those things that the season's also driving at. It's season 1 was all, this is a rebel cell on Lothal. Season 2 is more, no, we're finally beginning to build the alliance, so to speak. So there's more responsibility getting thrust upon Ezra, and more responsibility thrust upon the crew of the Ghost. And the reality is, sometimes they screw up, sometimes they fail. And you're right. I mean, you would think, wait a minute, you're trusting the fate of the galaxy to a 15-year-old kid, but then Sabine's only 16, and so a lot of these characters who are going to determine the fate of the galaxy, they're not much older than they are. They're very much in a similar spot, and so it's a situation of having to make do with what you got.
So, are there any episodes in this season that you could do without, that are fast forwardable, that are skippable?
Well, the
Dave,
Princess Leia episode, you mentioned as much, that it doesn't really move the story forward at all. It's simply there to allow a cameo of her.
it's there to make nerds from Knights of the Old Republic go crazy because you get the Hammerhead Corvettes, and then we can put them in Rogue One and see them take down the Star Destroyer. That's why. Anyway, go ahead, Dave.
I had a nice laugh over that too. I mean, like, yeah, the Hammerheads, you know. If you've seen Rogue One and then you watch this episode, you do have a nice moment there.
Now, I think as Dave just froze up, I think the interesting thing, take the picture. The interesting about this episode is that it does let you know that, yeah, you know, Princess Leia and you know, other people, they were, you know, they were kind of they're running weapons. They were, you know, doing underworld dealings basically for the rebellion. So it's just to kind of remind you of that. But yeah, the episode in the whole arc of the thing doesn't really. We already knew that. This is just a reminder of that.
Yeah, what I find interesting is I mean, there's a lot of these episodes that have seeds of stuff that will pay off later, but that they in and of themselves don't necessarily come off as complete as you would want them. Like the one with Brother to the Broken Horn with Hondo and Visago. You know, yes, they're going to be important to the climax of the series, but it's one you can skip and you don't really miss much in terms of the overall story. Or even something like the second aspect of Relics of the Republic, of the Old Republic, you know, where you have Agent Kallus chasing the old clones with Rex, and it basically becomes a slow-moving battle. You know,
that I thought those two episodes could have probably been one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, that they feel stretched out, but that's just it. It's like you know, the conflict ends up being that Agent Kallus speeds away and AT-AT pilot, you know, chases after him. It's a very much a Scooby-Doo ending.
The episodes we haven't talked about yet that I think are kind of skippable. I think the Legends of the Lasat one, it's a good episode, but I think the way that gets paid off was that they went, we at the very, very end of the series, they said, okay, let's remember that thing we did back in season 2, then let's just remind you of it. Otherwise, they needed a Zeb story because they gave a Hera story, they gave a Sabine story, they gave a Kanan story, they gave, you know, everybody got their stories, and Zeb needed one. And I don't know, it just didn't seem to go anywhere. And
this is going to go to the point I was thinking of earlier. I think if there's one criticism I would have of this season, is that Agent Kallus, who's the primary villain of the season, doesn't quite rise up to the level of either the Grand Inquisitor in season 1 or Grand Admiral Thrawn in 3 and 4.
Well, and but it's like I said earlier with the 501st, if somebody shows up in Vader armor, suddenly you are, you know, boring. You know, right. If you're Agent Kallus, which I think Kallus would have been a great villain for the entire thing, but suddenly you throw Vader into to bookend, you know, this season, then Kallus is overshadowed. You know, I think
I couldn't disagree more though, because I love his character arc. I think it's so interesting to see where he starts and where he ends.
Dave, I don't disagree with you. I think he has a terrific arc from seasons 1 through 4. His arc is amazing. I think as the primary villain of this season, he doesn't quite do as much for me. Probably because I know that there's a switch, but he doesn't get to the level of the Grand Inquisitor for me or Thrawn. Thrawn blows him out of the water as the villain, as the negative force opposing the crew of the Ghost.
I mean, you could also argue that this is the Vader heaviest season.
Also true.
And so this is really sort of Vader's responsibility of carrying the mantle of Big Bad this season. And you have the Inquisitor, the Inquisitors instead of the Inquisitor, you know, kind of taking up that mantle as well. You know, they are ramping up the danger level by giving them more adversaries rather than just a singular one. So I love where Callus ends up, and I love the fact that the episode with him and Zeb on stranded on the planet is some of my favorite Star Wars. I mean, it just is this episode kind of becomes necessary within Zeb's overall arc as well. If you're at all interested in his character, you kind of need to know what his people's story is and how he fits into that. And this gives you a lot more of that information. So I like this episode. I don't like it as much as the Zeb Callus stranded episode, but I like them both a lot.
And I think in terms of episodes that you can kind of sort of go, well, it's not really necessary, but it becomes so big. The Space Whales, the Purrgil episode, which I know that's low hanging fruit in the Star Wars community to say that the episode with the Purrgil in season 2 is skippable, and it is, but it's so vital for the climax and the resolution of everything. But that's just it. Even saying that kind of says exactly what it's going to take, and doesn't tell you why the episode's skippable.
Yeah. So I've mentioned that this season is full of connections and cameos, and I guess we had, if I'm not mistaken, Lando was in the Siege of Lothal as kind of a hologram. Then they have to get some stuff from Lando to get off Lothal. We had, of course, Leia. We talked about. We got Vader. So how do we feel about the use of those characters, their inclusion? Did they need to be there, or was it just kind of candy to make us old people, feel like I'm watching Star Wars?
You also got Hondo. You got the clones.
Yeah, I mean, we got all those from Clone Wars, but I think we need to divide. Going back to our conversation with Brittany, the generational divide. Let's talk about those classic characters first, because it's an easier fit to put in the clones and the prequels, the Clone Wars stuff. But like I said, the Vader, the Leia, the Lando in particular, as cool as it was, did it? I don't know. Go ahead and talk.
Okay, I guess I'll go. I think I think they were necessary in a way. You kind of sort of need them. You're starting to, like I was saying earlier, season 1 is just the crew of the Ghost on Lothal. We're beginning to see, and you got a little bit of a connection with characters like Bail Organa and Lando. But now you're beginning to see them becoming the Rebel Alliance. And I'm doing air quotes, with my fingers, which you can totally see on a podcast. But it's that idea of now you're making a connection of this crew is joining a larger fight against the Galactic Empire. So the idea that they would bump into some of the classic characters makes sense. Because the alliance is not big enough yet to say, oh, you're not going to run into them.
If you don't bring in Ahsoka Tano into this series at all, is there any reason why you need Darth Vader to be in it? Because getting back to what you were talking about with Callus, you had already set up, you could have the Inquisitors be the big baddies and Callus be the big baddies, and eventually make your way up to Thrawn, and you would have been awesome with the baddies. I think the only reason that Vader is there is because you got Ahsoka.
But is that a bad thing?
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm just saying, I would really like to get some people and just find their decision making. So is this story of Rebels about Rebels, or is it about finishing Ahsoka's story?
I like Vader's inclusion because it really puts Ezra and Kanan's skill level into sharp relief. When they encounter Vader, they're completely overmatched. And I appreciate seeing that because it kind of it acts not only as an indictment on their abilities and like there of course there's no way that they could be the chosen one, so to speak. They can't be the Luke Skywalker of the movies. And why can't they be? Because they're not as powerful as him. They're not as gifted as he is. So they're going to struggle in those kinds of confrontations. So it works on that level, but it also works on the level of we're the underdogs. And, the rebellion is just trying to catch its footing, and the Empire is this overwhelming enemy, and they've got this Death Star and this Vader and these Inquisitors and everything else, and it just feels hopeless for them. And so like the fight becomes more compelling on that level as well. So I would say I appreciated his inclusion, whether Ahsoka was there or not.
And I think
How about Lando? How about Lando?
I don't know about Lando.
I think what they used Lando for, they could have used Hondo and was just I think it's one of those things. If you look back at the original trilogy, Billy D. Williams does not have a lot to do even in Return of the Jedi. He doesn't have a lot to do. So it's like it almost is like people feel bad. It's like we need to give people more Lando when really nobody's really been yelling for more Lando. You know what I mean? It's like I really like more Donald Glover's Lando, for a while. But it's kind of like, why is Lando in The Rise of Skywalker? Well, because we killed off Han Solo. If Lando was such an integral part of, this story of the sequel trilogy, then he would have been in there with Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford. He would have been part of that original cast, but they just needed somebody. So he did seem to stick out every time he's in Rebels. It's fun. I enjoy it, but it sticks out. That's my point.
Yeah, I guess. I guess ultimately it's a question of why you can bring Billy D. Williams in, and it doesn't hurt. It doesn't detract. That's one thing I'll say about Lando. He never takes away. It's either a plus or a neutral. So to your story, you can move a lot of the stuff to Hondo or to Visago or to any of the other smuggler characters we've met, but if you can bring in Lando and have him be a part of this for a little bit, it can be a fun thing.
That's kind of like the Princess Leia episode. It's a fun thing. It acts as connective tissue. Is it critical to the story? Not as much as Vader. Having Vader there is just significant. And I would say the other cameos, if you want to call them that matter just as much as these characters showing up, are some of the vehicles. Like we talked about the Hammerheads making an appearance, and we talked about the B-Wing, and some of these original designs that are so important to people. That's connective tissue for people. It helps them connect this stuff to the movies. And then the music, of course. There's so many cues from all the different movies that they use in this series. And I just really appreciate that. Where Clone Wars kind of sometimes lost me was they would do riffs on some of those themes, or they would do these cues that sounded similar. They sounded Star Warsy, but they weren't the same actual cues. Whereas this one borrows the actual notes that you're used to hearing, and it just touches off this emotional reaction almost every time you hear it, at least for me. And so like for me, those sorts of pieces of connective tissue are even more important than the characters.
Yeah, and again, as I'm flipping through these, just the thumbnails of these episodes again, I am struck because I asked the question: is this the story about the rebellion, or is this more about Ahsoka Tano's story? The more and more I'm thinking about this, I think, Clone Wars and Rebels is Ahsoka's story. She's. I mean, because you're just. I'm looking at this. At the end of season 1 is where Ahsoka is like, we find out she's Fulcrum.
Mhm.
And so, Siege of then by episode 3, she's saying, "Hey, you need to go find my clone friend." She didn't say clone friend, but then just a couple episodes later, in Future of the Force is when you see just how powerful she is. It's her, I think, the first time we see her use sabers, and she, takes on the Inquisitors and just kicks butt. Yeah, just wipes the floor with them. And then at then you get the Shroud of Darkness where she's dealing with the visions of Anakin, but then the Twilight of the Apprentice. So this whole season is one big Ahsoka arc. And I don't mean that as a criticism, but it does go into what people felt with Rebels, is they felt they were sold a bill of goods. That this was, and that's why, let's go back to what we're talking about with Bad Batch. It's like, we're getting this series called Rebels. Oh, we're going to learn about the start of the rebellion. And no, it's continuations. That's the vehicle to tell these other stories, that were kind of left hanging. That's why I think Bad Batch is like, oh, we're going to get all these episodes of the Bad Batch. Well, no, I think, like we talked about earlier, you're going to get a vehicle that's going to be able to tell the stories that are left out there. So I don't think Rebels has one overall story as much again as it is the setting for these other interesting things that we needed to know about. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I just think that it's kind of like almost a series of one-act plays,
I think, to your point, that Ahsoka, you're right that she really figures prominently in this particular season. So if you wanted to make the argument that, like, season 2 is her and Anakin's story, you definitely could make that argument. But at the end of this episode, they're trapped in a temple together, and then you don't really see them after that. I mean, you do briefly, but hardly at all from this point forward. This is kind of, you say goodbye to them for a long time after this. And so we kind of return back to our primary crew. We get introduced Thrawn. There are a lot of other characters who figure a lot more prominently going forward. And so, like, I would circle back to season 1 and look at the introduction of all of these characters, the crew of the Ghost, and how well that's done. And yeah, maybe some of them take a backseat in this particular season at times, but I also feel like earlier we were talking about, they each have their own particular episodes, right? Sabine has an episode, Zeb has an episode. They do that intentionally because I think they do know that this other stuff has the potential to kind of overshadow those people. But they do to their credit, they do that. They bring those people to the forefront, and then we get back to them in season 3, I'd say. So, this is very much a series about the crew of the Ghost, and that's what I would call that. But season 2, if you want to make the argument, it's Ahsoka heavy. I'll totally hear that.
And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I was all set to disagree with you, Aaron, until Dave kind of spoke in, and kind of, because I do agree with Dave a bit. This is story. If you're going for one story thread in this series, it's a Crew of the Ghost story. If you want to go even deeper, it's Ezra's story. What I find most interesting in this series, in this particular season, season 2, this is the season where we begin to see the impact of the past on our characters. Characters like Vader, like Ahsoka, their relationship. Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
Rex, the way that they impacted the galaxy in the past, and their actions continue to impact Ezra's situation, Kanan's situation, Hera's situation, Sabine's, Seb's. So they're not just static characters existing on their corner of a galaxy far, far away. They're having to deal with the outcome of the choices that Anakin made, that Ahsoka made, that the people who are in the Empire make, and characters like Bail and Leia and even Lando made. So it's interesting putting them up against characters who've already made some sort of decision in their lives and go, because Leia's already a part of the Rebel Alliance. We know that she is because she's helping them, but she's not officially out, so they have to work within that framework. Or they know that Ahsoka has some sort of backstory to this guy who's hunting them down, but they don't know who the guy hunting them down is, which is surprising, but they know that it's all coming to a head with them. That's the reason they go back to the temple in Lothal, because they're very much in okay, we're getting hunted. We got to figure out a way to fight back, and it's impacting them, their own individual lives, but also the Alliance as a whole. So I would say that whereas, this season is Ahsoka heavy, like Dave said, I think it's Ahsoka heavy for a purpose. I think because they brought in Vader, they allowed them to go Ahsoka heavy by bringing in Vader and juxtaposing everything that they did in the Clone Wars and in the prequels that we saw, and how that's still having an impact so many years later.
And, Aaron, one thing I'll say too, just to kind of dovetail off what we were talking about with the Bad Batch as well, how they can kind of become a prism that through which we can see other aspects of the galaxy. The Crew of the Ghost is designed the same way. I mean, absolutely. You've got 2 Force-sensitive people on here. You've got a Mandalorian, so we can go back and revisit all of that. They introduce Rex eventually, so we can go back and look at some more Clone Wars era stuff through them. And like Fredo said, you bring in Ahsoka to kind of touch on some of those Anakin issues from earlier as well. And not to spoil things, but we eventually go to Tatooine as well, and we see a couple of interesting characters there. So,
which is interesting that we get to see Maul here because of all the impact he's going to have in season 3 and 4.
Oh yeah. And they don't even really hint at that here. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh my goodness, he's back. And then, is he dead? Oh wait, no, he's not dead. He's flying away in a ship. He's flying away in a ship. Mm-hmm. I wonder what he's going to do next. What's going on? What's going on with him? Are we even going to see him again? Well, yeah, we're going to see him again, and it's going to be great.
And the last thing I'll say, this season ended on one of the best cliffhangers. It was just, and everybody was like in the basement. It does not end happy, at all. At the end of the first season, Kanan comes into his own, and we rescue him, and everything's hunky dory. And this one ends just the opposite.
Well, I was just going to say, and what's interesting, what I found so rewarding is when we get to season 3, the start of that, the impact that this season has on the characters going forward is massive.
So that's Rebels season 2. I really enjoy the season. I think it's a good one. So yeah, get it on Disney Plus, stream it. But other than that, any last thoughts before we start wrapping things up?
So your favorite season?
Oh, I don't know. I think we'll have to talk about that after we go through all the seasons. I don't know if it's
that's a good point.
Favorite season. I think what I'll have to do is figure out if I open up my app which season's going to get the most. I'm going to watch this episode type of things, and I can't answer that right now. So
I will say this season has a lot of some of the not a lot, but some of the best moments of the entire series, and that's high praise because some of the stuff that comes down the line is even more impactful. But just it's a wonderful time spending with these characters and seeing them get put through the ringer. So you get highs, you get lows.
Again, I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. It's the most Star Wars-ish, season.
Very much so.
Every season has its nuggets that make you giddy. So but this one just felt a lot more like Star Wars, and I don't mean that 4, 5, and 6. I mean that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and and the Clone Wars. It felt like it belonged. So yeah. All right. Well, I guess with that, we will wrap things up for tonight. And thanks for listening. And you can, as always, you can find us on Podbean, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts. We're on Twitter and Facebook, Who Dat Jedi Podcast. Follow us, like us, do all those things, and spread the word. And if there's anything that you disagree with or you want to hear more about, tweet at us. And we're rather precocious on Twitter, so we'll respond. But other than that, everybody keep healthy, have a good week, and we will see you next week with another episode. So until then, we'll say who dat?
Who dat?
Who dat?
Oh, Fredo, who dat?
Who dat?
And there was much rejoicing.
Who dat?
McConkey.